Okay. Hello again. For those who are a bit confused, if you're picking up this, we got in the live chat, we got raided by some people doing some very nasty comments. And I would like to just say, moderators, old and new, thank you for your support in that. Hopefully, I've made a couple of tweaks behind the scenes. Hopefully, that will help the situation out and we won't have that one again. Okay, so I've made a couple of extra people moderators. Thank you so much. We should be on slower comments now. And hopefully some other comments should be potentially dodgy ones are being held before they're going live. Okay, well, we shall return to, I hope I didn't miss any super chats from the last one. What I will do, so this is restarting from last time. What I will do is, if I did, I will go back. I can see them. They get logged for me, and I will answer any that I missed on my next live stream. But Ryan Larkin, thank you so much, saying that raid was unfortunate. Much love to Robert and all of our mod gods and the ones recruited during the trial by fire. Well done. Yeah, thank you so much, people. I just dropped a few people in as moderators. So thank you for your help in the short term. And if you're wanting to do a long term, then I think we do need as many moderators as we can. John Morris saying, lots of comments in the show about northern austerity. Has there ever been a northern master of coin? Seems like the crown borrows or raises VAT. Yeah, so northern austerity is because they have to prepare for the winter. In the south, the winter isn't as bad as it is in the north. In the north, this threatens lives, livelihoods, absolutely everything. So you have to be more, pardon me, you have to be more austere in the north. We don't get huge amounts of information, it has to be said, about whether there's the equivalent of a small council when they had the Kings of Winter. We're not really told that. The implication is that the Starks, it's a much smaller area that they were governing, obviously, than the entire Seven Kingdoms. The Starks were ruling it largely in and of themselves, but because it was geographically wide, even if it's not as populous, a lot of the day-to-day stuff was delegated down to the smaller, the lords in their areas. Bear Island largely looked after its own affairs. They paid fealty to the Starks, but they did look after themselves. So that's where we're at. Did they have a Northern Master of Coin? We don't know, is the only honest answer there. Aaron Strever, I have a question that I've been wondering if Aragorn took the Iron Throne when Robert did. I've been wondering if Aragorn took the Iron Throne when Robert did, who would be his small council and how well did he rule? Well, so Aragorn, this was actually George R. R. Martin's main critique. Why I did my video on Aragorn's tax policy was George R. R. Martin's critique of Tolkien. He's a huge Tolkien fan. We shouldn't think that he isn't. But he did say, why should we just take Aragorn, at a word that he was a good person, therefore he was going to be a good king. I want to know more. I want to know what his tax policy was. So that's where that video came from. So in Tolkien's world, it was, it sounds quite simplistic, but if you were a good king and a good ruler, then the land prospered, and that was the sort of the feel that was there. And so if we take that and transplant that into George R. R. Martin's world, then Aragorn would be a good king and the land would indeed prosper, in the same way that we're told with Jaehaerys that was the case. Who would be in his small council? One likes to think that he would pick people in Westeros who would do good, and he probably wouldn't want people like Littlefinger. I think he would see through Littlefinger. He may have Varys, though I suspect he wouldn't put up with Varys's bad side with what he does with the his little birds and the like. But yeah, so I think he would probably keep Sir Barristan on the old duffer. But he would not have on some of the people, and someone like Pycelle maybe, but the Lannisters wouldn't have as much power, so it wouldn't be as important, the fact that he was a Lannister person. Mr. 25, nothing grinds my gears more than those who poo-poo on the upcoming Amazon series when it's clear they know nothing about their Calabeth. So this is the Amazon Lord of the Rings series. Basically we know very little. They've given us, there was a rather glossy video, Welcome to Our Fellowship, where they sort of introduced us to who was on their team, but they have kept everything battened down. I mean, to be honest, COVID has helped because we haven't been able to travel, therefore there has been less, there have been fewer people trying to do the sort of behind the scenes digging of what's actually going on, but they have kept everything very quiet. We know it's in the Second Age, we assume it's in Numenor, but we know nothing more than that. So until we do, then I think all we can say is the actors they've cast look good, the directors they've hired look good. It has clearly got a huge budget, and it is clearly going to be set in an exceptional world that has been created, and all of that bodes well. There are a lot of random people like Tom Shippey were attached and aren't attached anymore. People like Brian Cogman were attached, aren't attached anymore. There's at least one actor unattached themselves from the project because they didn't like where their character was going. So there are a few rumblings around the outside, but it's just too early to say. I am absolutely convinced that at the very, very least it's going to look beautiful. Beyond that, I don't think we can say anything yet. Question from John Morris. Is it not also a Stark equals York joke? Yes. So I don't know what the context for this is. Yes, but when George R. R. Martin was starting this out, as we know, it's the War of the Roses, the House York against House Lancaster, and that is Stark and Lannister, and it's not really a joke as an inspiration, I think, would be where I would go with that. Alicia Kingston, thank you very much. I have added you as a moderator as well. Things seem to be going a little bit better now, so thank you everyone for your help there. Glenn Thrasher, thank you for the super sticker. I hugely appreciate that. Sebastian Holden saying, hi Rob, will the Dornish live to tell Doran the truth about Quentin's death, or will it be lost? Please say excellent, absolutely, googly woogly. Well, I'm happy to say those things, particularly googly woogly. In terms of the telling Doran the truth about Quentin's death, yes, they will find out about this. Barristan has already thought, I need to send the bones back. And this, I think, is going to be a very important plot point, and is actually part of the reason why we had the whole Quentin business. Because what's going to be sent back? Yes, Quentin's bones or his body or however it goes back, but the equivalent of pinned to it will be attached a letter from Barristan saying, okay, so this was Quentin who came over here, and with your offer of an alliance and marriage, and so Daenerys refused that, and then he died, was killed by her dragons, and now she's completely disappeared and we don't know where she is at all. So that is going to drive the Dornish from... Doran's plan is always everywhere, I will try to marry my family to the Targaryens. That seems to be his plan. And he wanted to marry Doran to Daenerys. That clearly isn't going to work. And he's now not going to be particularly a fan of Daenerys because of what he's just heard from the Barristan. So Fagon has arrived, and he's sent Arianne over there. So he's now going to get a marriage to that bit of what he thinks is the Targaryens. It's they will survive long enough. There's a lot of Dornish plot going to be happening. Andrew K, what is the estimated budget for the Lord of the Rings series? I've heard some massive estimations. Yes, there are massive estimations out there, and nobody's confirmed it totally. The numbers that we have heard are $250 million just for the rights to do the Second Age. That's not even the age that the main Lord of the Rings story is. This isn't a redoing of the Lord of the Rings story. This is basically the prequel, but $250 million just for the rights. Another $250 million budget for making it. And then there are lots of rumors and counter rumors that they may have bought rights to other things as well. Added onto that, probably there's going to be extra budget for huge publicity when it comes out. So it's a lot. The main point here, I think, is not what the actual budget is so much as this is Amazon throwing everything at it, which I think is going to be good in terms of they're not just going to accept any kind of dodgy second-rate graphics or writing. They're taking their time with this. They're going to make sure it's right. Now, whether what we think is right is what they think is right is a different matter, but they are definitely taking their time. There was never any danger of them sort of just making one episode like a pilot and then deciding, now we're not going to go with it, because they put so much money behind this. But what they did was they said, okay, well, we recognize that there is a valuable role in doing one episode, stopping, taking stock, thinking about it, moving on. So they even plugged in initially a 5-month gap. They were going to do 2 episodes, then they were going to have a 5-month gap when they were going to stop, take stock of everything, change cast members around, think about stuff. That all obviously had to change with coronavirus, but the fact that they'd even put in that block of time just to stop and think about stuff is incredibly rare in the TV industry. So the main takeaway is they are taking this seriously. They are throwing everything at it. Question from Chuckstein. Benjen as that Stark figure the others seem to be seeking, transformed or corrupted to lead them. Is that due to his bloodline? What awaits him? So the others seeking a Stark figure, this, I mean, it may have come earlier than this, but I first saw this when Matt, Joe Magician, came out with a really interesting interpretation of the prologue of book 1 that was that the others we see there see Waymar Royce and are testing him out. Is this a Jon Snow figure? They're looking for someone who looks Starkish. Personally, I think I've got huge amounts of time and respect for Matt. I think he produces some excellent. I think there's not as much evidence there to say that's definitely what was going on. You could certainly interpret that in very different ways. But Benjen, he's definitely not disappeared from this plot. It's very clear in book 1 quite how far Benjen's shadow is cast through this, that what happened to Benjen Stark is one of the big mysteries that we get set up in book 1, and it carries on because we don't know what happened to him. He did disappear. He went north of the wall, and we just genuinely don't know what happened. My best guess is that he was sent out there to go and investigate what was going on, not just with what happened to Waymar Royce, but these rumors of the others, that what's going on with the wildlings. I think he just kept on his mission. The other people who went with him, yes, they may well have died, but I think he just kept on with his mission. And at some point, we're going to see him come back and say, okay, guys, I've been to the far north. I've been to the lands of always winter. That, I think, is what is going to happen, and he's going to come back, and we are going to meet him again. There is no hint that he's dead. Jon is always adamant that he's not dead. Alicia Kingston, thank you. The Abby, with the Irish name I never pronounce, saying, "Hi Rob, not really a question, but I have a theory that the Iron Islands are partially based on the Aran Islands on Ireland's west coast. I wonder if many locations in the books are inspired by real places." I think there are lots of places in the books are. I don't really know the Aran Islands, I have to say, but yes, that certainly makes sense. In terms of the places, obviously we know Hadrian's Wall inspired the Wall. King's Landing is, to my mind, very obviously inspired by London. And then you can get George R. Martin talks a lot about places like Dawn, which is inspired by Wales, not in terms of climate, that's more Spanish or Mediterranean, but in terms of sort of the history of Wales and resisting invasion and the like. So there are a lot of places which are inspired by real world places, and to be honest, the sort of the further east in Essos you get, often you get a lot of very obvious parallels. You get Yeetees is very obviously echoing China. You get Meryn and Slavers Bay areas very obviously, and the old Empire of Geese echoing Egypt. Valyria is very Romish. So there are a lot of places that are like that. But yes, certainly in terms of the way that Westeros is done, it's, if you take the island of Ireland and the island of Britain and you sort of plonk them together one on top of another, that's the shape of it. So yes, you get certain, like the Aran Islands would certainly make sense being sort of off the west coast. One thing that I saw quite recently, I think it was somewhere like Reddit, someone pointed out that if you take Bear Island, which is famously produces very strong female leaders, and then you try and map that across to, if that is a rough map of the UK, what would that island be? Actually, that would be this land of strong female leaders would be the Isle of Man. So that amused me, and I suspect that's a little George R. R. Martin joke. Adam Price, just a theory. Could the Hammer of the Waters separate a section of the Weirwood network, creating the Shade of the Evening Trees? Thanks for the content and all that you do. I read A Song of Ice and Fire after finding in Deep Geek. Well, again, I love it, the idea that I inspire people to read books. So thank you so much for that. And I hope you're really enjoying them. But in terms of the Hammer of the Water separating a section of the Weirwood network, creating the Shade of the Evening Trees, yes, that is my current best understanding of what may well have happened. So the Shade of the Evening Trees, the ones we see in Karth outside the House of the Undying, they are being created as this sort of warped opposite of Weirwoods, not just in their colouring with the black, the blues and the blacks, but also you have the drink that they produce, which is very much like the Weirwood paste, but Bran is made to drink, and that tastes the same. When you hear Bran describing it from his point of view, what it tastes like, or Dany, or even Aaron, the same taste each time. So they both provide some sort of visions. Now, does this where does this kind of Hammer of the Waters thing come in? There are legends and rumors of Children of the Forest type woodswalkers in Essos and the Shade of the Evening Tree, which appears to be this sort of weird opposite of the Weirwoods. That makes sense if they chopped off the link between Westeros and Essos, and we know that the Weirwood network, if it's all connected, then it doesn't seem to go under deep bits of water. If that is what the Hammer of the Waters did, sundered the two, they were actually cutting off part of their own Weirwood network, which is horrific when you think about it, the length that they were willing to go to. And so, yeah, it's my best current understanding of it. If you want more, I would recommend Disputed Lands. Amanda has done a really good video on the links between the two, the Weirwood trees and the Shade of the Evening trees. Ben Pop, do you think the Fagon plot could be sort of based on Perkin Warbeck, who faked being Richard, Duke of York, to overthrow Henry VII? Quite possibly. I do not know enough about that individual bit. I'm aware of the fact that happened, but I don't know any more details there. This is one of those things that I will throw to the chat. If anyone is a Perkin Warbeck expert, then please do say something. But it certainly makes sense. What George R. R. Martin tends to do is not just take an historical character and then drop them into his novels. He takes inspiration from things, and so it's the kind of thing that you would get. The Man in the Iron Mask is another example of, is this person really the rightful king? Was there a bit of a swap going on? That kind of feel as well. You can get that kind of inspiration from a lot of different places. But yet, given Henry VII's proximity to the War of the Roses, then I think that would make sense. Lady Pushkin's saying, really feel for you, Robert, with all that nonsense. You handled it wonderfully. Well, thank you very much. I think the moderators handled it wonderfully. I just sort of, in a rather flustered way, tried to reboot the live stream. But thank you again, moderators. Who is Arya's big kill going to be in the books? It was the Night King in the show. Yeah, so the Night King, they made up the character of the Night King, and they therefore made up the fact it was Arya who killed him. But Arya's story therefore does seem to be leading to this idea of a big kill, because she's a trained assassin. Now, I've got, a few thoughts on this. First of all, her kill list, it's a prayer in the books, really, rather than the kill list, but we understand it as the kill list. It's still got a few people to go through, and some of those are significant characters. People like Meryn Trant, who she obviously killed on the show. I think that she will kill and Ilyn Payne is a significant character in the books as well. So I think that she will be killing off a few of those significant characters there. I think that she may well end up killing Littlefinger. She obviously did again on the show. The two big characters that are on her list are the Mountain and Cersei. Now, my take there is with the Mountain, I think that's going to end up with the Hound, and Cersei, I think that that's going to be ending up with Jaime. So what does that mean? I'm slowly starting to wonder whether we're not actually leading up to her having a big final kill. What they did on the show, and again, with the show, we shouldn't take it as this is what's going to happen, but they often try, I think, to capture the feel of what's going to happen in the books without necessarily getting all of the details right. What happened on the show was that she reached a point where she was about to be giving herself over to being this cold assassin who just kills people and doesn't have a heart anymore, and like Sandor, like the Hound, and he basically talks her out of it. And you may or may not remember, there was what at the time felt like quite an anachronistic scene right at the end of that episode, where Arya, having gone into the Red Keep with the Hound, then he says, do you really want to do this? You should turn around now, or you're just going to turn into somebody bitter and old like me. And she does turn around, and then she heads back out onto the streets of King's Landing while Drogon is firebombing the city, and she starts helping people get out. And then at the very end, the last scene we got of that was this white horse, and she climbs onto the white horse and she rides out of the city. Now, I think that, I mean, it felt quite John Woo-ish, but I think they were trying, the showrunners were trying to visually show us this is a fresh new start, a white horse that she just climbs on and rides out of it. She is heading out and away from that. So I think what we might get in the books, like with Jaime, where we're thinking this is a redemption arc, but actually maybe he will fall back at the end because he's human. Maybe Arya is going to go the other way. At the moment, she's on an arc, an anti-redemption arc. I don't even know what it is, an arc into darkness where she's turning into a cold-hearted killer. Maybe she will stop and turn around and go, that's not me. That's not where I'm going. That would work as an arc for me, which means that she doesn't have this big kill at the end of it all. Jack Hurst saying, how great would it be to see Tom Bombadil in the Lord of the Rings series, even just briefly walking through the forest and singing? It would be amazing. I love Tom Bombadil. I don't know how they could do this, though, without it would just have to be a small, brief thing, an extra or something, I think, because he is so different. And I completely understood to everything else. I completely understand Peter Jackson. I would have loved him to be in the films. I completely understand Peter Jackson not including him, because having set up the mood for The Lord of the Rings, Kate Blanchett as Galadriel talking over the history and lore at the beginning, Gandalf coming into the Shire, establishing the Black Riders and the ominous threat coming in, to suddenly have hey do dilly do coming up, big bright colors, yellow clothes, blue hat, just not anything to do with, he's world important, he was not plot important. And I think that this, it would have to be done extremely well for people who are not fans of J.R.R. Tolkien's wider works to not be going, what on earth is that? That does not fit. That's the point, obviously, but yeah, I would love it. I think it would have to be done extremely well for it not to seem jarring. Adrian Birchall saying, in The War of the Roses, a York girl married a Lancaster to end the war. Will Sansa remarry Tyrion in A Song of Ice and Fire? I have speculated on that one in the past, but so I think it's possible that it's one of the two likely-ish endings for Sansa's arc. She has to feel safe. She has to feel in control. So her ending up as the Lady or Winterfell or the Queen of the North or whatever it is right, either with somebody she feels safe with, and that could be Tyrion, or on her own. And I think of the two at the moment, I'm erring towards on her own. Chuck Stein, what about Benjen leading the White Walkers? A confrontation of Stark versus Stark at Winterfell, one for the living, the other for the dead. Expected hero to villain. Yeah, I get it, and I think that the link across between the others and the Starks is definitely strong. It would make a lot of sense. And again, having said, Benjen is heading off and we'll get all this information, it would be true George R. Martin style for him then to be turned into a white or whatever just at the wrong time. So I'm not expecting a big glorious re-entry for Benjen, but I do think that he did carry on doing the thing he set out to do. Taco Guy 1988, what do you think of the chances, thank you for the super chat, what do you think of the chances of Robb being resurrected? I noticed Robb said to Jon that the next time they see each other, Jon will be wearing black in the show. Is this possible foreshadowing for resurrection? I don't think so. I mean, I've heard a couple of people speculating on it. He's been dead for a long time. He has been dead for a long time. And the way that death and resurrection seems to work, Qyburn seems to have figured this one out, is that when you die in the world of ice and fire, yes, you go, but something lingers, and then you can keep hold of that something that lingers. But the longer you are gone for, then the less of you there is. So Beric was brought back so many times. Each time he lost a little bit of himself. Each time it wasn't huge amounts, but it all built up. Lady Stoneheart, she was gone for a few days. When she comes back, a lot of her has gone. Robb has been gone years now. So there will be almost nothing left of him as a person. Probably also physically, to be honest. So I don't think he's coming back. I think he has gone now. Plum Kettle saying, so sorry that people are awful. You are a light. You are appreciated. Thank you very much. So yeah, all of the credit, I think, goes to the moderators. So thank you very much for that. Sean McD, do you think the person who Theon Greyjoy encounters in the snow of Winterfell is imagination, or a person that somehow knows Theon? Is it possible that it is a character we have seen before? And then you said that's one of two, Sean. So, and question, I just want to know your opinion. Thanks for all your content. I've been following your channel for many years. This is my first time. Well, welcome. So thank you, Sean. The person, Theon, this is the hooded man, and this is one of those things. The hooded man appears for less than a page in this many thousand page long fantasy epic, and yet people do seem to be very curious about who he is. So my answer is, and I know some people, sorry, I should probably clarify, some people, what happens is that Theon is walking through the grounds of Winterfell, and someone, a hooded man, bumps into him and basically says, I recognize you, you're Theon, you killed the Starks. And basically his hand goes to his sword, and the implication is that he's going to kill Theon for what he did. They have a brief exchange, and Theon says, I'm basically a dead man already because Ramsay's gonna do terrible things to me, has done already. I am Reek, I'm not Theon. And the other guy goes, okay, I'll leave you to him, and then keeps on going. And that's it. Now, the chapter is called The Ghost of Winterfell, and Theon spends a lot of this chapter wandering around, thinking about the past, having maybe visions, going to the weirwood tree, hearing that calling to him. It's not quite psychedelic, but he's clearly not 100% right in the head. This has led some people to, because he's everything that Ramsay has done to him. Now, he is, some people have suggested that this is just him seeing himself there and judging himself for what he's done, which I can understand. I get that. I mean, it kind of makes sense. My take is, as with these things usually going with Occam's razor, the point of this chapter is that this is Theon slowly trying to, or the people around Theon trying to bring him back to who he is. He's not Reek, and it's going to build up to the point where he can manage to escape with Jane Poole. So that's what this chapter is doing. He is the ghost, and all around him are ghosts, because he was alive, and now what he is now is just a ghost of his former self. I think this is very probably, and I always forget his name because he's a very minor character. I think he's Hollin, a Stark retainer, who does know Theon from all that time before, so will recognize him and know his name. His mannerisms are very much like him. So I think it was just him, and I think this is just a hint that these are people returning to Winterfell, and we know that there are Stark loyalists in Winterfell. So I think that's what it is, but I don't think we should overinterpret this too much. It is just a passing moment. Sebastian Holden, will Shira Seastar reappear? The rest of the Great Bastards have had huge impacts in the story in some way beside her. Please say Higa Herga. Happy to say Higa Herga. Shira Seastar, I believe, already has appeared. I believe Shira Seastar is Quaithe, personally. So why? Quaithe is a magic user. Quaithe is she knows the common tongue, so she seems perhaps to come from Westeros. And Quaithe, above all, fundamentally, is trying to get Dany to be a Targaryen. That's what she's doing all the time. Remember who you are, the dragons do. She's trying to get her not to trust all these people around her. She's trying to get her to go and invade Westeros, despite all these other voices around her. That is exactly what we'd expect Shira Seastar to be doing. Shira Seastar was the woman that Bloodraven loved and he'd lost contact with. She was a magic user. This all makes sense. It also, I think, makes symbolic sense. George R. R. Martin loves these kind of ironies, these kind of echoings between different bits of his story. Bloodraven has decided, he's seen that there's a danger in the world. He wants to raise up the prince that was promised. He has identified this as being Jon. He is being Jon's guide and champion. Shira Seastar, if this is her, has seen that there's a threat in the world, has identified that there has to be Azor Ahai reborn prince that was promised, and has decided that this is Daenerys, and she is being her guide and champion. But they do not know what each other are doing, even though they were once incredibly close. Their thinking is the same, their desires are the same, but they have been led to slightly different conclusions. And that works really well for me as a sort of the way that George R. R. Martin writes story. Cloaked One, thank you very much, saying, Robert, thanks for pushing through despite those interruptions. You are the best and it is very appreciated. Well, thank you very much. And thank you so much, fantastic mods, old and recent, for all your hard work in protecting our little realm. Yes, absolutely. Agree with all of that. Mods, you are wonderful. And Vampiris99, I think Arya will have a big kill. Walder Frey, or I'm increasingly thinking Lady Stoneheart, then turn from continuing on a dark path. I think Walder Frey is going to be Lady Stoneheart's kill. There's a lot of story going on in the Riverlands, and she is hunting down Freys. I think she is going to take down Walder Frey. I like this idea that Arya will kill Lady Stoneheart, because she's not gonna. I think she's not gonna survive through to the end game, and her reason for staying alive, the thing that's driving her, is this need to find her daughters, which she needs to do. She doesn't know where they are, and also to avenge the deaths of her sons. So she knows Rob's gone, and once she kills Walder Frey, she has avenged the death of Rob. But Bran and Rickon at the moment are actually still alive, even though she thinks that they're dead. So if she avenges Rob, if she discovers that Rickon and Bran are still alive, and if she meets somehow or knows where her two daughters are, actually what drives her reason for living, will be gone. Can she just stop living? It's possible, but could she get somebody to kill her? Yes, although whether that would be Arya or maybe Nymeria through Arya, that's another possibility. Questions. I have some more questions. Let me find them. So, Duskobra, what are your thoughts on the Sword Dawn? Will it play a part in the story, or is it just cool dressing? Love the channel. Thank you very much. Yeah, I talked about Dawn a moment ago. I think it is definitely a part of the story. I think it will re-emerge from Darkstar. So I'll pick up from where I got to when I was talking about it before. I think Darkstar will become part of Fagon's Kingsguard. That will bring it back into the story. I think pardon me, I think Jon may well pick it up after that. And you have to ask what role is this? I think this is connected with the fight against the others. And so I think that will be taken. It may well be Dawn, the thing that ends the long night. It is Dawn. So I think that will be the role it will have, is in some part in ending the long night. I do also wonder, though this is just tinfoil, if Jon does kill Dany, does he do it with some significant weapon? Would Dawn be that weapon? It's possible. Sebastian Holden, Jon's body suffered mortal wounds when he was assassinated in a Dance with Dragons. How will that affect him post-resurrection? Will the stab wounds just heal? So we don't know, but the guess is that, so with Beric, he still suffers from the wounds that he had. So the assumption is that Jon will be increasingly damaged and hurt. He's already got a slightly burned hand and things like that. What will happen to his body, I'm almost convinced, is it will be put into the ice cells. It will be literally frozen. So effectively cryogenic freezing of his body. And that, so it won't lose anything more. And it will just be the wounds that he had, which is lots of stabbing. So he's going to have a lot of new scars. But he won't have the blood pumping through his veins like he did before, so it'll be a bit different. Yes, the short term is will it affect him? Yes, it definitely will. Question, apologies, I can't, looks like that's maybe in Russian or something. I can't pronounce that. Apologies. Saying hi or privet from Moscow. Oh, I guessed right. Will the character of Patchface play a significant role later on, or was his only purpose to deliver those prophecies? Well, it's very devoted to Shireen, and so I think that his role will be to be defending her when she is taken to be burned by Melisandre. And I think that he will do some damage to someone in that, I'm pretty sure. So you have to remember that it won't just be Stannis wanting this. Melisandre wants it. There will also be other people who support this, like Val, for example, will almost certainly support it. She thinks that Shireen should be killed. There would be very few people protecting her. I think Patchface will be one of them. Kelly Johnson, future live action Dany depictions be a warrior. I'm not 100% I understand the question there, but will she be a fighter? I think she'll be a fighter on Drogon. I think that's her role, as opposed to being like a warrior. Cloaked One saying, for Tads 1001, thank you again, Cloaked One, picking up stuff for other people. Would love to stay. I have work in the morning. My question is, what are you most excited to see in the Amazon TV series? Lore friendly, of course, but what would be your highlights? So assuming this is going over to Lord of the Rings, and I said this at the top, I was going to say at the top of this, we've shifted to a different stream. But I've got a load of questions about Lord of the Rings, which I will do at the end of this. But just in terms of picking off this one, what am I most looking forward to? I think it's the filling out of the Second Age, by which I mean that there is a lot of information out there, but in terms of the stories and the characters, we haven't got huge amounts. There's lots about the Third Age, which is the age in which we had the main Lord of the Rings story, and quite a lot about the First Age as well, in the Silmarillion. But the Second Age, we don't have huge amounts. As I said, we just have that one, the Mariner's Wife story. So it's giving more character to it, and Numenor itself as a place should be astonishing. I'm really looking forward to seeing what Numenor is like. This should be this great Atlantis, height of human civilization, but on a road to decadence and destruction. So I think it's the setting as much as anything else. Beth Carolan, Dany is warned against the perfumed seneschal, and Tyrion travels to Meryn on the stinky steward. Is she being warned of his bad advice or betrayal? I think it's many things with that. This perfumed seneschal could be Varys, could be a bit of Tyrion. We have to remember this is Quaithe, and what Quaithe is trying to do is get Dany to not trust anyone, just trust herself, be herself, because all the advisors coming in are telling her, oh, you should be doing this political thing in Meryn, you should be holding back, you should be negotiating with them. And Quaithe is wanting her to, no, you're a Targaryen, get on the back of a dragon, go over there, attack people, conquer, that's what you're about. If she trusts people other than herself and her instincts, then she will be less Targaryen. And that is what Quaithe is trying to get her to stop. So I think the perfume seneschal will be left to interpretation. And Quaithe will be keen for Dany to interpret that as widely as possible. Lady Pushkins, if you had to, Tolkien or George R. R. Martin, thankfully I do not have to. So thank you for that question. It's a question I hate because I love both of them. Catherine Fursith, this is going to Patreon questions. I must quickly give a shout out to your live stream with History of Westeros about the Forsaken. Yes, please do check that out. I'm not doing many other people's live streams at the moment because of time constraints, but I was delighted to accept the invitation from History of Westeros. If you've never come across them, experts in the world of A Song of Ice and Fire, and we were looking at my favorite pre-release chapter from the Winds of Winter, which is The Forsaken. So it was a really good discussion. Do go and check them out. I'm sure one of the moderators will be able to put a link in the description or link in the chat. Question about Sandor's role and arc in the remaining story. I can see it makes sense for him to play a role in the Scouring of the Shire that you predict will be the last fight against Euron and Cersei or the Mountain. How will we view him in the end? Probably just as dual as we viewed Jaime. Yeah, so I think that his arc, and he will return. He's not dead in the books. We're left with reports that he is dead, but he isn't. He will return from the Quiet Isle. His arc has to end. It started when we first met him with the Mountain, with his brother, and he will, and fire. And his arc will take him around to a point where he has to meet the Mountain again. And there were, I can remember leading up to season 8, lots of people were talking about Clegane Bowl, the fight between the two Clegane brothers. I still hold on to the hope that in the books it's not just going to be a fight. that it's going to be, and I had people in the chat suggest this to me a couple of years or more ago, and I loved the idea, and I've not left it since. The real end to Sandor's arc surely has to come when he realizes that this isn't just about getting vengeance, anger out against his brother for the ills done to him, but seeing what his brother has become, the zombie mountain, and giving him a mercy killing. And how do you... He is a science wight. This is a body reanimated by Qyburn. How do you do that? By fire. And that has to be how Sandor's going to do this. He has to kill the mountain by fire. That's where I see him going up. Will he go and fight the others before that? It's possible. I don't think it's plot imperative. I don't think that he's suddenly going to... It was always on the show. It was a bit like, well, why are you there? You just like hanging on, tagging on for the fun. It was not 100% clear why he did. We would need a reason for him to go there in the books, I think. He could, but we would need a reason. The two characters that he feels protective towards, being Arya and Sansa, is the only reason for him to be heading north, in my view. But it ends for him with the mountain. Second Class saying, if Saruman took Gandalf's offer and joined them, would the Fellowship have even accepted him after everything he'd done? How would that go? So, if would the Fellowship have accepted Saruman? Well, I think Gandalf wouldn't really have trusted Saruman, to be honest, and Saruman would never have gone with him. So, I think if that's what you're suggesting, I don't think it would have gone well. The point about the Fellowship is that they're not supposed to be powerful. Yes, Gandalf is stupidly powerful. Yes, Legolas is an elf with stupid bow skills, and Gimli's a great fighter, and Aragorn is a high king. But the point is that Gandalf actually doesn't survive very long as part of the Fellowship, and the Fellowship itself breaks apart very quickly. It was always only ever stealth, and it was always only ever not fighting fire with fire. So to suddenly have, you can't have another magnificently huge wizard as a part of this, and it just wouldn't have really worked. Anime lover Nicole, do you think Satin was part of the Mutati? Ollie was, so maybe Satin could have. Not 100% sure I understand that one. Apologies. I will have a think about that, and if I will try and answer it next week. Sebastian Holden, if Jon does not pump blood post-resurrection, is he undead or immortal? Will he set Dawn on fire with his blood like Beric did against the Hound? So we're waiting to see with Jon. Is the honest answer is Jon is going to be a different kind of white, if that is even the right word. So George R. R. Martin went on record, one of the last bits of extra clarification he sort of came up with after Jon was resurrected in the show, was he was talking about Beric in the books was the foreshadowing for Jon, so that you understood about the concept of what he then called fire whites, that we didn't just have ice whites, he had fire whites. And that kind of makes sense, but at the same time, where Jon seems to, and Beric doesn't seem to be having blood, he is undead, brought back from the dead, so he doesn't need to eat or sleep really. He is like the undead, but Jon is going to be different because he is his spirit did not die. He will, the theory goes, walk into ghost. His body will die, but will be frozen completely. So when he comes back, his soul and his body will just be restored as they were, bruised and battered, and him was a part of Ghost for a while, and he will be more wolfish. This is undeniable, whatever your interpretation of wolfish is, but he's not going to be the same as Beric. He's not going to be the same as Lady Stoneheart. He's not going to be the same as the Mountain. He's not going to be the same as the Ice Whites. He is going to be different to all of them, and we have yet to see exactly how it works. Adam Alolo saying any Witcher stuff coming up. There will definitely be Witcher stuff coming up. I will be doing that when we get the TV show. I may do something if we get the anime film, which we've been promised for this year, the Vesemir origin story. I will be producing stuff around that. Vampirist99, read Lady Stoneheart. I think Arya or Nymeria will kill Lady Stoneheart to release her from the horror that she's become. Arya equals mercy. Yeah, good point. N3SGIS. Did the Balrogs lose their minds, or did they just never have the same consciousness as the other Maiar? I did a video on the Balrog, incidentally, yesterday, if you're interested in Balrogs. So this is the Balrog that we know, which goes by the name of Durin's Bane, or is known as Durin's Bane. So the Balrogs were Maiar, so they were like these angelic beings, the same way that Gandalf and Saruman and Sauron are. So they're at this sort of higher plane of existence. They fell with Melkor, Morgoth, so they are effectively fallen angels who took on a fiery appearance. Did they never have the same consciousness as the other Maiar? No, they did, but they chose a physical form which was different. That's the sort of the take that we have on there. Natalie Smith, yeah, you're back. Yes, I am back. So I'm glad you managed to find me. Question from Diego Godoy. Hola, Robert. I've been reading A Game of Thrones, and in the Daenerys chapter where she meets Mirri Maz Duur, Mirri mentions that she has been trained in a Shai by Maester Marwyn. Do you think this will play against Marwyn when he tries to join Team Daenerys, or will she even remember his name? Yeah, so she does say this. She tells Dany and Jorah, probably crucially at the same time, and Jorah goes, "What, a Maester? They come from Westeros." So they have a conversation about this, and who is this Marwyn person? Describe him to me. So they do. I think probably either Dany or Jorah will remember when Marwyn comes across, but I don't think that should make much of a difference. I don't think that they will be judging him by what Mirri Maz Duur did, because I don't think that I don't think there's any implication that he was involved in what she did in any way, shape, or form, and I think that they will probably realize that. And I think that Dany will want a maester, and I think everybody will be as part of effectively her small council, which she is going to start building up properly. When you think about who is it who's now there in Team Dany, then she may well have Tyrion. She's got Barristan. Jorah may well be there. She will be getting Makoro, who's going to be probably the equivalent of her priest, and Marwyn, who's going to be the equivalent of her archmaester. So that's she's now going to have her equivalent of a small council going forward. And yeah, I think that they will understand that he didn't do that. Just Singh, In Tyrion 1, A Clash of Kings, Cersei explains that it was Varys' idea to get rid of Barristan Selmy from the King's Guard so they could have someone to take the blame for Robert Baratheon's death. If this is true, can we assume it was Varys' intention to detach Barristan from the Baratheons, Lannisters, so that he would then join up with Fagon over in Essos, not thinking he would go on to join Dany? Well, I touched on this a little bit earlier. So I think that the the longer term intention and understanding is that Sir Barristan would go and see, as he did, seek out the true heir. And Illyrio, who was working with Varys, sent him over to find Daenerys with a view, I think, to Daenerys and Fagon getting together, and so Sir Barristan coming around that way, rather than Sir Barristan going straight over to Fagon. But yes, I think that Varys was definitely thinking a little bit ahead of this game and saying, okay, well, we can get that he will be a useful person for us to have on our side. Stacey Burke, after several rereads of the series, Stannis has become one of my favourite characters. He has everything that Westeros wants and needs in a king. Honest to a fault, believes in and follows the laws of the land, honours his subjects' loyalty, rewards them based on character, not by birth, and so on. And yet he is rejected and mocked by so many. Ned Stark is loved and respected because he is fair, loyal, and honourable. Randall Tarly is respected because he is just and fair and revered for his military prowess. Is Stannis rejected simply because he's not personable? And why were he and Renly never given the titles of prince? They are brothers to the king, after all. Well, on that second point, it's a technicality, I think. So it was because they were technically never heirs. They were his brothers, but that does not mean that they were ever considered to be heirs to the throne until Ned said they are, because their claim to the throne was the same as Robert's through the female line, whereas when Robert had his children, they were one supposed from him, so they were princes and princesses. So that's why it was, they were born before the event, so they never were technically in line and princes. Although in reality, yes, if Robert Baratheon had died before he had children, maybe Stannis would have had a good claim, but that, I think people were just hoping it never came to that. So in terms of the Stannis, I think I don't disagree with this. I think you slightly overestimate the love and respect people had for Ned Stark outside of the North. In the North, yes, absolutely. But in the South, lots of people call him, the honourable fool and things like that. They don't really respect him. Cersei doesn't seem to respect him. Varys does, but within certain parameters. Littlefinger certainly doesn't. So I don't think Ned had as much. I think we as readers give him a lot of respect. Randall Tarly, I don't think people think of him necessarily as fair and just. They definitely respect his military prowess. Stannis, interestingly, yes, he is mocked, but generally the mocking starts initially with his brother, and it starts with the fact that he's not in the favor of the king. So Robert is happy for Stannis to be mocked. If Robert loved his brother, people wouldn't have been disdainful of Stannis. And then after that, he took himself off and was just incredibly mysterious. What's he doing over there on Dragonstone? Didn't rally people around. People didn't love him. They had Renly was a charismatic guy. Stannis wasn't a charismatic guy, and Renly attracted lots of people to his cause, and Stannis didn't, even though he had a greater claim. So it's not. It's partly because he's not personable, partly I think that everyone to a certain degree gets mocked. Sebastian Holden, how does Darkstar take Dawn? If he steals it, how will House Dane respond? Will Val survive the story? Love your insight. Thank you. Will Val survive the story? I hope so. I don't think she's plot necessary to survive the story, which does leave her in a bit of danger. But probably is my guess. In terms of how Darkstar, I think Darkstar just takes it. House Dane is not a it's not a strong house at the moment, it has to be said. So their heir Ned has headed off. People don't know where he's gone. The Ashara has disappeared and died. Arthur died. There's not many of them left there, so he could very easily just, I think, go in and grab it. We probably won't even see it happen. We'll probably just see him appear with the sword, and then we'll get the backstory sometime. George R. R. Martin's a very realistic writer. Yes, he writes fantasy, but I think a lot of the time he just says, he just thinks, okay, realistically, could this person just go and do that? Well, fine, they'll go and do that. And that, I think, is what's going to happen with Darkstar. Nathaniel Fant saying, hi, if Tyrion was the son of the Mad King, wouldn't he be next in line for the throne? I love your channel and hope you keep it up. Thank you. I certainly try to. Wouldn't he be next in line for the throne? Well, he would be an unacknowledged bastard son if he were the Mad King's son, which makes him not in line to the throne unless he gets acknowledged by the king, and that king is obviously dead. So unless they dig up something from the Mad King that says, yes, Tyrion is my son, then no, he would not be in line. Might he be? This is one of the things in my re-listen through Game of Thrones, and I'll be going through the other books as well in time. One of the things I've been keeping a keen ear out for it, more hints about Tyrion Targaryen, because it's the theory that I oscillate on the most. I've said this before, I know, but the early chapters for Tyrion have a lot of dragony imagery attached to him, a lot of it, which does at the moment make me err towards the idea that probably he is, but we just will never know. We will never know, and he won't be recognized for that in any way, shape, or form. GH, was it known that Durin's Bane was a Balrog before the Fellowship met it? And did the Ring or Sauron stir it up, or was that Balin's doing? Yes. So the Balrog, when it pushed the Durin's folk out from Moria, then yes, they knew what it was. Now, what brought it back, it was the dwarves digging too deep. I think there's a little bit of anti-dwarvish propaganda that they dug too deeply. If you wish to sort of circle this round, you could certainly argue that the return there was a bit of folly on their part, but no is the short answer. This was just the dwarves doing what dwarves do, and it was pure bad luck that they uncovered a Balrog, in my view. Willionaire saying, please say this phrase, Euron and Roderick are in cahoots. Thanks. Don't record me saying that, but yeah, absolutely. Sasek saying, I have a friend who will be almost angry if Tyrion isn't the third Dragon Rider. I like to bother him by saying how I believe Tyrion is Tywin's only kid and that Jaime and Cersei are Targaryens. But I kind of do. Well, I don't think Tyrion's going to be the Dragon Rider. I think the third Dragon Rider is going to be Euron. Personally, that's where I am at on that one. That doesn't mean that he's not a Targaryen. That just means that Euron is going to take a lot of what the Night King did on the show, that kind of concept of being like a big baddie. Question from Jack Beddoe and Chong Kim. Thank you very much for your kind words over on Patreon. No questions attached there, but thank you. I hugely appreciate it. The Greasy Strangler. My question is about old Nan. She seems to hold wisdom and knowledge way beyond her years, and I've seen theories about her true identity. What are your thoughts? I have done a video on old Nan. If you want my full thoughts on her, the short version is that she's I think she's what she appears to be. She is an old woman who tells stories. That's it. She's not secretly somebody else hiding away. There are lots of characters in George R. R. Martin's world who are secretly somebody else. I don't think she's one of them. It's worth noting that whereas we talk about her as rightly as having huge amounts of knowledge of ancient times, which is really useful, and everybody ignores her and they should pay more attention. That's all true. But not all of the things she says are true. Arya remembers her telling her that the Titan of Braavos, when Braavos is in danger, it wades out into the water and attacks the enemies. That's not true. There's also something Kat remembers her coming up with something about mists at Storm's End being people's spirits, which again appears not to be true. So this is... There are lots of things that she says that are they're not true. They are just old, random stories. What she is, though, this doesn't mean that she's not important. What she represents is the tradition, the oral tradition of passing down knowledge and understanding and stories. The storytelling tradition is personified in Old Nan. Now, that is important because George R. R. Martin does this echoing of history, and we've got stories that come down from thousands of years ago, and here we see that actually happen. Her passing down those stories to Bran and to others means that Bran will theoretically be able to pass it down to the next generation, but in terms of him, he will find that useful, and that is how information is passed, not by people writing stuff down and reading it in books, but by the stories coming down from one generation to the next. So that's what she is. She is a representative of the oral tradition that George R. R. Martin has given us to understand how these stories have been passed down from generation to generation. Dan Leiber, do you not agree that the army of the dead should have won the battle and ended the North and all of Westeros? When you say should, I'm glad they didn't. This is on the TV show. I assume you're meaning should they have won? Well, morally, no. In terms of the actual battle. The actual battle as it was set up, this is just TV show stuff. It was just about whether or not Arya could do that thing. And when I was talking earlier about undoing the magic, this again, I think this is what the showrunners were trying to show us. And indeed, they said in their sort of commentary on it, if you watch that it wasn't Arya killing the Night King, it was Arya undoing the magic that created the Night King, which is an important distinction, because the Night King was created by having dragonglass shoved into his heart in front of a weirwood tree. The Night King was uncreated by having Valyrian steel shoved into his heart in front of a weirwood tree. That is what they were trying to show us. Whether they, everybody just saw Arya doing this really cool move and killing him, fine. But that was what they were trying to show us, was the uncreation of the Night King. And if you get rid of the Night King, then the entire army collapses. So really, this wasn't a battle. It was a battle on one side, but it was just trying to get Arya to do that to the Night King in the right place. That was all it was. It's just that they didn't know, or Bran seemingly knew that, but didn't tell anyone. Let's not get into that. Should they have won it? Yeah, probably. Question from Sebastian Holden. Hi, Sansa recalls Bronze Yon brutally beating Ned in the yard at Winterfell. Does this hint Ned's fighting ability was not on a par with Sir Arthur? So with Arthur, if you're talking about Sir Arthur Dano was the greatest fighter at the time. He seems to be he would have been better than Ned. Absolutely, there's no doubt about that in my mind. Jon Royce is a good fighter. Ned is a good fighter. Ned was probably a lot younger then. But in terms of, if this is sort of asking about the battle at the Tower of Joy, it ends roughly how we think it should. So you've got Ned and his 6 guys. Ned is a good fighter. He had Howland Reed, who wasn't. He had I've forgotten his name now. One of Brandon's squires who had been captured and held in the Red Keep. Someone in the chat will remember his name. And then Ned released him and took him with him. He was not going to be a good fighter. He'd been in the Black Cells for a year. There was no way he was a great fighter. The others were quite good fighters. Then we had, on the other side, the greatest fighter in the land, plus Oswald Went, who we don't hear huge amounts about, but he's a Kingsguard and is presumably quite good. Then we have Lord Hightower, who Gerald Hightower, who was a great fighter but was getting on a bit and had an injury. So where does that 3 against 7 work? It kind of ends up with, if Howland Reed wasn't actually involved in the fighting, the 2 people who would be left standing would be Ned and Arthur Dayne, and Arthur Dayne would probably be better than Ned. Or almost certainly be better than Ned. And so Howland saving Ned's life somehow by stopping that from happening, it all makes sense. So yes, Arthur Dayne was a better fighter than Ned Stark, almost certainly. Ben Travato, are you a fan of Mark Felton? You both have voices so perfectly suited to the subject matter. It's as though it became sentient and started speaking. Well, it's a very kind thing to say. I'm aware of Mark Felton. I've not really watched much of his stuff, but I hear good things. Rob Sop saying, love your content. Thank you very much. I hugely appreciate that. Brian Shearer, I'm just checking how many more questions. I've still got quite a few more questions, but we can do this. Brian Sheeran. I have a question concerning Lana, Tyrion, and Littlefinger. According to Wikivars and Fire, Lana was born the year of or near Tyrion's marriage to Tisha. What do you think about the possibility of Lana being Tyrion's daughter? Perhaps Tisha felt she had no choice but to live as a prostitute. Littlefinger knows Tisha and Tyrion's story and tells Sansa the sordid tale. He also comments that whores love to gossip. He owns several brothels. He has strong links to Braavos. He has framed and conspired against Tyrion from the start. Knowing that Tisha is alive, he can produce her to free Sansa from her marriage to Tyrion, as well as remove Tyrion from the game. Or maybe Lana and the Sailor's Wife are seeds in George R. R. Martin's vast and verdant garden. This one tickles my theory twig. What do you think? Yes, it good phrase, tickles my theory twig too. So for those who don't know, we know the tragic backstory of Tyrion and Tisha. More tragic for her than for him. They got married. This was Tyrion's first wife. Tywin found out, was having none of it. Got the marriage, or got Tyrion out of the marriage effectively. We don't know the details of the legal technicality there, but then he handed her over to the guard at Casterly Rock, and then sent her away. And this hugely, and they did what you'd expect, and this hugely traumatized Tyrion, and we do not know what happened to Tisha. Now, there are suggestions that maybe Tisha is this character called the Sailor's Wife in Braavos, who is a sex worker, and she has this I mean, it's hard to know what to call it really, but she refuses to sleep with anyone unless they marry her in this kind of faux ceremony. And then she speaks common, sort of Westerosi, so implication she may well have come from there. She apparently was once married, but then her husband died at sea. She's called the Sailor's Wife. And she has a daughter called Lana, who has golden hair. Now, Lana obviously sounds a bit like Lannister, and the golden hair also kind of hints it. The age of the daughter Lana does match up with when Tyrion and Tisha were together. So the theory is, particularly given this "you must marry me first" idea, that there's some sort of trauma there, perhaps, that the only person that she did want to sleep with was Tyrion, who she was married to. Might this be Tisha, and might Lana be Tyrion's daughter? It's possible. It's entirely possible. The other option is Tyrion's uncle Geryon, who was a sailor, and we know that he frequented places like Braavos, so maybe that's his mistress. Maybe he married her in secret. That ties in with the idea that she did lose her husband at sea. So we don't know. I do like this idea that, as you said, it tickles my theory twig that this is indeed Tisha. But then I do wonder whether or not she may have gone down to Mere or somewhere like that, that maybe Tyrion will run into her again. That bit of the story is not ended. Tyrion's arc is not finished there. He has been hunting for her, all through his life, and now finally he may have a chance to find her. Sebastian Holden, who kills Roose Bolton and Randall Tarley? Will Dickon survive the story? Can Rickon stay on Skagos so he does not die? His death would be so tragic. Okay, I'll try and do them. Can Rickon stay on Skagos? He could do, but I think that Davos will get him and bring him back, and I think he will die after he comes back. Will Dickon survive the story? I suspect probably not. Who kills Roose Bolton and Randall Tarley? So I think that Randall Tarley probably will. I mean, it's hard to say. He may well stay loyal to Cersei. He certainly doesn't seem to be wanting to stay loyal to the Tyrells. He will go with whoever offers him the most. Roose Bolton, he could be killed by Ramsay, but there is like a cast list of 1 million for killing Roose Bolton, to be honest. The battle we're about to have outside Winterfell is not actually literally outside Winterfell. It's the Crofters' village a few days away. The Roose is not involved in that. He's just staying in Winterfell. So I think that there's a fair to medium chance that he gets killed off by somebody within Winterfell as part of this great northern conspiracy. And Ramsay then takes the reins afterwards. Danielle Barnett saying, hi, Targaryens never seem to marry the Celtigars despite being Valyrian. Any hints why? Been driving me crazy for no good reason. Well, House Velaryon are bigger and more powerful and all the rest of it, and they do intermarry with them a few times. The House Celtigar are of Valyrian stock. We don't, and they do play a role. There's a couple of Masters of Coin from House Celtigar, for example, so they are there. But the Velaryons, although we think of them as marrying the Velaryons all the time, it's not as much as we might think. In the early days, yes, but then later on, no. House Celtigar, I think it's just an accident that they haven't. They're a much smaller house. They would probably preferably not marry them. So if the Targaryens kind of switched between, am I marrying somebody to keep the Targaryen line strong, or am I marrying somebody for political reasons? If they're trying to keep it strong, then the first choice is a Targaryen. The second choice is probably a Velaryon. And then you get, what are the other options? Maybe I can look somewhere over at Essos and maybe House Celtigar. So they're quite low down the list there. If they're looking for somebody for political reasons, then they're not. House Celtigar is not important enough at all. So they would not do that. It would be, the Baratheons, the Aryans, the whoever, the Martells. These are the big and important families they want to tie in. So that's probably why. It's just that the right moment never happened, when there was always a better Targaryen or a better Velaryon, or they weren't looking for that. They were looking for a political marriage. Anthony Gagan, thank you so much for the super sticker. I hugely appreciate that. And question from Misting: will Jon Snow ever meet Frodo in the books? I think Jon Snow will become Frodo in the books. That's my take on that. I think he's going to be so damaged by what he does and what he has to do in order to save the world, that he leaves it in the end. I think he will become, he's being written as Aragorn, but he actually is more like Frodo. Mara Lee, what do you think will be the role of the Faceless Men in the last two books? Do you think they'll be involved as assassins for hire? So I think that they have two roles. The first one is the role, obviously, with Arya. I think that they are training her up and then releasing her out into the wild. She will probably think that she's escaping, but I think that they will be very happy because they know who's on her kill list, and they are very happy for her to be killing those people. So I think that's what's going on. The other interesting thing, going on, obviously, is Jaqen H'ghar, or the Faceless Man we know as Jaqen H'ghar, who has appeared down in Old Town. What's he up to? Again, this is something I covered when I was chatting with Z's History of Westeros the other day. There's three options. Either he's being paid still by Euron to kill someone down in Old Town, or maybe even blow the whole thing up if they're being paid for it. We'll happily say that the Faceless Men blew up Valyria as a whole, so Old Town's not going to be a problem for them. I don't think that's the case. Secondly, maybe they're on some mission that we know absolutely nothing about, murdering somebody for some reason we don't know about yet. Or thirdly, which is the angle that I like the best at the moment, is that they are actually doing something for themselves. They're not just being sort of assassins for hire here. If you take them at their word, they are a religious order. They're sayings that we think they're cool sayings. They're actually statements of faith. All men must die. That's what the whole thing is about. Everyone has to die. And they look around them and there is heresy everywhere in the world. Just the last few years, suddenly, an army of the dead north of the wall, red priests bringing people back from the dead, Qyburn bringing someone back from the dead. There is heresy, people stopping people from dying everywhere, and they want to stop this. And Jaqen H'ghar is going to the place of knowledge to figure out how to stop this. So that would be my personal take. C Star, thank you very much, saying, since Lady Stoneheart and Jon Snow are both undead in the books, do you think that they will meet again, and how will that meeting turn out? I don't think they will meet again. I get asked this in various ways at various times, and I completely understand the desire. I have the desire as well. Cat was horrible to Jon, and there's a couple of hints in the books that she kind of now realizes that she was, and this would be really good for her arc. The argument goes for her to be able to meet up with Jon and know that actually she was really horrible to him because she thought that this was Ned's bastard, and it's not. For her to understand what Ned was doing and to therefore seek forgiveness from him or something like that. I completely get that. But firstly, they are very far apart in terms of distance, and their immediate plots are not bringing them close to each other. Jon, for the beginning of the story of the next book, is going through his whole business at the Wall of being dead and coming back again. Then he's going to be presumably retaking Winterfell. That's as far south as he's getting. Lady Stoneheart is in the Riverlands seeking vengeance on the Freys. She's not going anywhere near Winterfell. So their stories are not bringing them to each other. And I think Lady Stoneheart, that part of her that with what was going on with Jon, that's not there. All that's left of her now, all that's left of Cat now, is this need for vengeance and to find her children. That's what's the thing that lingered. Qyburn's phrase, something lingers, and it seems to be the thing that is closest and strongest to you. That's what lingered with Cat to make Lady Stoneheart. So I don't think they will meet again, I have to say. Eric Fogg, regarding the Dance of the Dragons epilogue, this is the Kevin Lannister one. Cersei asks Kevin about Dorna, that's Kevin's wife. Was she planning on violence against Kevin's remaining family as revenge for the Walk of Atonement? Would she have murdered Kevin and Pycelle had Varys not done so? Well, this is, I mean, it's hard to say with Cersei. Cersei does blame Kevin not for making her do the Walk of Atonement, for not stopping it. She seemed to be under the impression that he should have been able to do that, and he didn't. So they have this weird exchange wherein Kevin is running, the small council effectively, and then he goes off and says, well, I probably should go and have a meal with Cersei and say hi to Tommen, and so he goes off and does that, and they have a chat about a few different things. And then she says, can I ask you a question? Are you bringing your wife here? And he says, no, she's not. This isn't really her thing. She's going to stay home. And Cersei says, oh, it's good that a woman knows, when a woman knows her place. And he says, well, what do you mean by that? She says, well, I think I've already said what I mean. And it's like, I think you have said what you mean, Cersei. So it's a little bit of an odd line. I think definitely she would have been thinking about how does she get some revenge on him. But now he's dead, the situation changes completely. And her brain will click back into that, what would Tywin do? And her brain will go, Tywin, he doesn't let a Lannister be killed. He seeks vengeance, even if he doesn't like that Lannister. He seeks vengeance. A Lannister always pays their debts. And then she will go, who did this? She will find some evidence that there's Tyrells, and she will try and kill them. So she may well have been thinking of something randomly, but that's in the past. Within minutes of that conversation, that was already gone. Sebastian Holden, have you heard of the naked knight theory for Sir Barry? He's on an untrained horse and his helmet is blocking his view. It's theorized that he will be stripped of his armor in the bat of fire and killed. No, I do not know that theory. So apologies. With Sir Barristan, I think the big interesting thing is whether he goes over to Fagon. It's not definite, but it's possible. Question from Lady Pushkins saying, the Starks can warg and see through their wolves' eyes. Can this power be reversed in any way and the wolves see through their owners' eyes, or will we never know? Well, we will never know, but there's probably not. So warging into something seems, from what we got from Bran, you're pushing your mind or consciousness into someone else's brain, and we get descriptions of that Bran could feel Hodor sort of hiding away in a corner because he didn't like it, which is understandable. Somebody's just come in and taken control of him. So the implication is that you're aware of somebody's trying to come in and see through you. Somebody can't just see through you. But there is a sort of tweak here in that the Stark direwolves have a connection, and you get them an understanding that sort of can go that route. So Bran, for example, is aware of Rickon heading away from him. When they split up, he's aware of Rickon heading further and further away because he can sense through Summer, sensing where Shaggy Dog is. Similarly, Jon has a dream when he can, it would seem, look through Shaggy Dog's eyes and see what's going on, where Rickon is. And that's through the link between the two direwolves, it would appear. So the direwolves themselves have these links. The humans can see through the direwolves' eyes, and one direwolf can see through another's eyes. But as far as we're aware, then a direwolf cannot see through its owner's eyes. But maybe if we get that Jon as ghost character, we will find out a lot more about this. Mara Lee, thank you so much. Very generous of you saying woot. Love that one. Question from Brian Sheeran. Where do you think Tywin got Ilyn Payne's replacement greatsword from? It looks very old. Carved runes, dragonglass face, rubies, and 6 foot long. At first, I was sure it was a glamoured ice, but if so, where did Tywin get the Valyrian steel for Oathkeeper and Widow's Wail? It's also described as sharp as any common steel could be, and Ilyn wields it with ease. So, firstly, yes, it's definitely not a glamoured ice. Ice was melted down, and Tobbo Mott did this, and he melted down the ice, the Valyrian steel, into 2 different swords. Ilyn Payne had hold of ice for quite some time. It seems that Joffrey gave it to him, and he used it as an executioner's sword and cut off Ned's head. And so when Tywin took it off of him, actually, this is a ridiculously expensive thing. And so Tywin did have to sort of exchange it for something that was also pretty expensive. I think he just had it made. I think he had it made, especially for him, a 6 foot executioner's sword, but looks really good, has a ruby in it, dragonglass, and all the rest of it. So that which is used for ornamentation. So yeah, I think he just had it made rather than getting it from somewhere. I don't think it was old. I think it was new. Joel of St. Pete. Hello, Robert. I've taken to listening to your content while tending to my bees. Fantastic. The mostly gentle industry of the ladies is a lovely compliment to your dulcet tones, although I have to say that one of them gave me a good zap as you were discussing your theory on the unmaking of the others, so perhaps she disagreed with you on that point. Apologies, because I said that theory again just a few minutes ago. I hope that you didn't get zapped once more. Eric Ferg saying, what do you see happening to Meryn, Trant and Boris Blount? These are two members of the Kingsguard. Now, they're both loyal to Cersei, and they're both sort of hanging around King's Landing. Boris Blount is getting pretty old and rubbish these days. Meryn Trant was never great, but he's an okay fighter. What will happen to them? I think they will stay loyal to Cersei. I think they will head off to Casterly Rock with her when she goes. I think Boris Blount may well die because I don't think he's going to survive very long. He found it hard to stand up in that epilogue that we were talking about a bit ago, just during a meal. So I'm not sure he will survive, but Meryn Trant will go with her. And I think that he's on Arya's list for killing what's his face? Syrio Forel. And so I think that she will kill him. Question from Brian Sheeran saying, do you think there's foreshadowing for Tyrion to join the Night's Watch? I don't think so, I have to say on that one. You could draw out some things there, but I don't think that's his fate. So Bobbert Ross saying, what do you make of the Lem Uncloaked theory? Richard Lonmouth equals Lem Lemoncloak. Also, what will come of Tom O'Sevens being in Riverrun? Tom O'Sevens being in Riverrun, he is a member of Brotherhood without banners. He will be the person who allows them in. There's a very small garrison there. The Brotherhood without banners will retake that, and the Blackfish and his garrison, who were let out by Jaime Lannister, will retake it. And this is going to be part of the retaking the Riverlands. This is going to be one of the themes of the Winter, is the retaking of the Riverlands for the Tullys and the Stark loyalists. The Lem Uncloaked theory, I love this. I don't know whether it originally came from there, but I definitely give all of the credit to Lady Gwyn from Radio Westeros. It's been on this channel a few times. Excellent theory. For those who do not know, Richard Lonmouth was one of Rhaegar's squires, and with a guy called Miles Mouton. And we know what happened to him. He died. Richard Lonmouth, we don't know what happened. Now, with Rhaegar, and everyone that was around him, they all died or disappeared. Robert Baratheon was going to kill everybody associated with Rhaegar. That much is very clear. And when you look at, we know that Rhaegar had a very small circle of very close friends. He obviously died. Ashara Dane was Elia's chief handmaid. Effectively, she allegedly died. I don't think she did. I think she disappeared. John Connington was also a bit of a Rhaegar fanboy. He got exiled, and we're told that he died. He obviously didn't actually die in the end, but he disappeared. Miles Mouton, we know, died. Rhaegar himself died. That is it. Oswald Went died. That is the small cabal around Rhaegar. The only person that we don't know was Richard Lonmouth, and he was important at the time. He was almost certainly one of the group. It wasn't just Rhaegar going picking up Lyanna. It was a group of his closest friends, half a dozen. He was almost certainly part of that. So he knows things about what was going on. He was there at the tourney at Harrenhal. He gets a name check at the tourney at Harrenhal. And so he knows things that were going on. He will know, for example, that Rhaegar and Lyanna getting together, this wasn't an abduction. He will be very aware of that. So he is an important person, but he disappears. What happened to him? George R. Martin will definitely have decided what happened to him. But Lemoncloak appears in this story as a member of the Brotherhood without banners, and Arya thinks he doesn't quite fit in. He wasn't one of the original members who went off with Beric and Thoros right at the very beginning, nor is he obviously a member of a house that's been just destroyed, or a person who's just left an army. However, he clearly is martially trained. He clearly is a swordsman. He has on this very yellow cloak, but never seems to wash it. And there are lots of the language symbolism about him is to do with things like skulls and kisses. These are things which are very much associated with. He was known as the Knight of Kisses. So this is the language imagery works really well for him. Yellow was the color of his house. So that all works quite well. And then you say, well, how does he fit in with the Brotherhood without banners? Well, he becomes the spokesperson for Lady Stoneheart. This is the people. And if you think, who is he going to have sympathy with in this great war that is still raging across the continent? Well, he was clearly friends with and loyal to Rhaegar, but he was also friends with Robert Baratheon. We know that he was drinking with him at the tourney at Harrenhal and having a great time with him. So he does support Robert Baratheon, but he also supports Rhaegar, and he doesn't support the Lannisters. The Starks, they were badly done by in his world. He will know that Lyanna was in love with Rhaegar, or starting a relationship with him, or whatever it was, and he will probably be very aware of, if not the details of what happened at the Tower of Joy, but he can probably guess what Ned found when he got there, and will know that Ned said nothing in order to, keep it all secret, and he will understand that, and so he will feel some affinity for Ned's widow. So I like this theory a lot. I've not done it justice in just this last couple of minutes. Do go and check it out. If you Google the Lem Uncloaked theory, then you'll be able to find it. Just checking I've not missed a chat. I did. So Jay Lord, there's a Reddit post that's gaining a lot of attention. Take a look and read out Stark Wealth book versus show. I will have a look at that after the live stream. Thank you very much. Always happy to get some recommendations. Mara Lee, will the Fiery Hand play any future role in the war with the others or the war for the Iron Throne? I don't think that they care about the war for the Iron Throne. What they care about is what they consider to be the great apocalyptic battle of the age, which is their god against the great other. So they may well start getting involved. They may well come across with Dany, but they will be looking to going forward, going north, not faffing about dealing with the Iron Throne, which adds a different dimension on the show. Dany wasn't wanting that. Nobody was suggesting she go north until Jon Snow appears and go, you should come north and deal with this. She is going to have people who are trying to get her to go there already. It's her who's wanting to take the Iron Throne. Eric Ferg, what was Littlefinger's plan with Lysa once they were married? Was he always going to murder her, but her blabbing secrets and threatening Sansa sped it up? I think that is exactly what happened. His plan was that he wanted to be the real ruler of the Vale, and for a while he could do that as being Lysa's husband, But if he could be Lord Protector of Robert Arryn, then that does the job just as well. He probably he makes up a lot of stuff on the spot, Littlefinger, to be honest. But his longer term plan now is Sansa, and it's very obvious that this is in book one. Littlefinger is, when he first meets Sansa, he is weirdly creepy, even by his own standards. It's he sees her at the Hand's tourney, and he goes over and he doesn't introduce himself. He just sort of babbles a couple of things, strokes her cheek, says, "You really look like your mother," and then walks away without saying goodbye, which is not like him. Second time he sees her, he sort of is the only person. She says something mildly funny, and he's the person who laughs, and it's just what's going on here, Littlefinger? So he clearly at this point is changing his mind, very flustered, discombobulated, and so the Lysa Arryn thing is still his way in to be running the Vale, but once he's gotten into that situation, he doesn't need her anymore. J. Lord saying, it points out that Winterfell is far larger and the Starks are better dressed in the books, and the show changed that. Winterfell is definitely larger, and everything is larger in the books. It has to be said, but they kept the wall nice and tall, but pretty much everywhere is larger in the books. The Starks are better dressed. Yes, I can probably I can agree with that. The Starks are a wealthy house. They were kings of the North. There's absolutely no doubt about that. So if that's the point that Reddit post is trying to make, then I would heartily support that. Johnny Giant's baying, greetings from the lands of always winter. Going back many years when the community was much smaller, it was very rare to meet anyone who knew of the A Song of Ice and Fire series. I often reflected what the title meant. In the early days, I thought it was essentially the story of Jon Snow and was very pleased with myself for drawing the line to R plus L equals J. Since then, I have thought how the series title could apply to so many situations. Dany and Jon, the others and the dragons, etc. would be interested to know, what does the title mean to you and to other members of Patreon? Well, the title of the series works on many levels, and so I agree with you. This is the point of how George R. R. Martin has done this, is that you can apply this in a number of different ways. I'll talk very quickly, I think, about 3 different ways. One of them, Jon, definitely ice and fire. His symbolism all the way through is ice and fire together. Frozen fire, dragon's blood. Dragon glass. This is he is half Stark, half Targaryen. He is ice and fire. Then you get the sort of the much higher level Song of Ice and Fire. You get the Robert Frost poem that a lot of this is based on, that I should have memorized by now, but it basically says ice and fire can both destroy this world, and it doesn't really matter which of them does. And that is what we've got here, is 2 threats. We might think it's just the others, but it's also the dragons. Both of them could destroy the world. How do we need to stop both of them somehow? That's at the highest level. And then at a very, very specific level, the Song of Ice and Fire, we get mention of the Song of Ice and Fire when at the House of the Undying, Dany has the vision of Rhaegar, and Rhaegar says he has a song. This is referring to his son Aegon. He has a song. His is the Song of Ice and Fire, which implies that this is an actual song. And there's a fantastic theory out there that I've sort of talked about a few times, that when Rhaegar, as we know, he went to Summerhall, he kept on going back there, and whenever he came out from Summerhall, he just went there with his harp, he'd come out with new songs. And who was at Summerhall? the Woods Witch, the great prophet who prophesied about the prince that was promised. Is she telling him some words of prophecy about the prince that was promised? Did he put one of these into a song called the Song of Ice and Fire? I think that it makes perfect sense to me. And so I think there is a song called the Song of Ice and Fire, but it works on so many levels, this. James F. Parham, what is the significance of the Rosby ward stroke inheritance mystery? This is one of those things that it's obviously book only, and it's quite a detailed book only. And it's intriguing because we simply do not know what's going on in it. So Rosby is a castle and village quite close to King's Landing. It seems to have been quite an impressive castle. Cersei put Tommen there for safekeeping during the Battle of the Backwater, which she would only do if it was a reasonably good castle. But at the same time, House Rosby is not a particularly important or influential house. Now, Lord Rosby existed for the first few books, and I think it was Giles Rosby. I might have got that one wrong, but he was unwell. He was like a sickly man. He was briefly Master of Coin. Then the Iron Bank paid him a visit, and he had a coughing fit and died the next day. There's no implication that this was murder or anything like that. He was just a very unwell person. And then we have a couple of times we have this mention of who's in charge of Rosby now, and it appears to be a ward. They had a ward that because he didn't have any children. So the question, who's in charge, who inherits, and it gets put off. Cersei makes a decision. Well, the crown will just take it over. If he's not got any children, the crown can have it. But the ward appears to be starting to flex their muscles. The ward of the previous lord. He didn't let the Stokesworths, who are another house nearby, stop by on the way. They didn't let them stay overnight. And the question is, who is this ward? We don't know. Cersei says he's not a blood relative, and Pycelle goes, well, and then we move on. So it's like there's a hint of maybe he is a blood relative, but maybe a more distant blood relative. It's not 100% certain. I've seen a convincing argument that this is Olyvar Frey, who is one of the many Freys, the children of Walder Frey. Walder Frey married a Rosby. We don't know the relation to these Rosbys, but presumably they are linked. And it makes sense if he gets sent down there to be a ward, to be brought up there. Walder Frey doesn't need any extra people hanging around. But the twins, Olyvar then becomes Robb Stark's squire and gets very loyal to Robb Stark. And then he kind of disappears. Walder Frey makes sure that he's not at the Red Wedding, protecting him, his own family, which is a little bit suspicious at the time. And then we realize what's going on. He gets sent off for unnamed duties and disappears. So maybe this is him. In any event, this person clearly seems to be at odds with Cersei and the Lannisters. Cersei wants to take this off of the ward. The ward is clearly digging in their heels in what is a reasonably strong castle. Why does this matter? What is the point of this mystery? I think the point of the mystery is not who is this ward. Let's assume it's Olyvar Frey. It may not be, but if it is, the question is, what is the strategic importance of Rosby? The strategic importance of Rosby, it is one of, if not the closest castle to King's Landing. And it's it's astride the road, so it's actually a strategically important place. If they wish to prevent things going in or out of King's Landing, that they can do that. Also, so maybe if this escalates any further, maybe Rosby will sort of prevent provisions going into Cersei. But also there is I've talked before about the fact that Rhaenyra, when she was a queen during the middle of the Dance of the Dragons, but then they raised taxes and everything was going wrong, and then had to abandon King's Landing. She went out and tried to go to places like Rosby and were just turned away on the flight from King's Landing. And I do wonder whether that might happen again. That Cersei may have to escape from King's Landing, having raised taxes, maybe having destroyed the Great Sept, definitely not being very popular, and Rosby will not let her in. And that, I think, is probably the biggest plot point that we've got going on there. J Lord saying, I think the show combined Jon and young Griff. R plus L equals young Griff, and Jon is Ned's son. Also about the Traveller's Guide to Winterfell, would commoners like us be allowed in the main keep? Well, in the main keep, you'd have to have a reason to go in, basically. So if you're a commoner who is a member of the Stark household, then yes, you would be allowed in. If you're just there with no general purpose, then no. You think that young Griff is Rhaegar and Lyanna's child and Jon is Ned's. That doesn't work for me. I think that all of the imagery for Jon is that he is Rhaegar and Lyanna's son. I'm not going to go through all of that. I've done videos on that if you are interested. And all of the imagery and hints are that young Griff is actually Blackfyre. Cloaked One picking up on a question for somebody else. Again, thank you, Cloaked One. For Luka Milinkovic, great videos, man. 2 questions. Do the others have some kind of political organization, rulers, ability to negotiate, and your opinion on a Mance prologue chapter in The Winds? Okay, so on the others, I sort of half answered that one already. They clearly have some sort of organization, civilization, but we don't know. It's beyond our understanding of what it is at the moment. Do they have an ability to negotiate? They have an ability to communicate, and if they have an ability to communicate, then they do have an ability to negotiate. So yes, theoretically, but whether it actually gets to that, I'm guessing no. As to the prologue chapter of The Winds of Winter, George R. Martin has already confirmed it will include Jane Westling, Robb Stark's widow. Now, that doesn't mean it's from her POV, but it will include her. So it's going to be down in the Westlands, so it's not going to be Mance Rayder. So sorry about that. Mance is going to be hiding down in this is my take, he's going to be hiding down in the Winterfell crypts, and we're not going to see him until he emerges much later, undoubtedly having found some things. I suspect another part of the Horn of Winter, but that's just my own personal guesswork. So in terms of what the prologue will be, she is about to be transported across to the Westerlands, and by Freys and Lannisters, almost certainly that is going to be that carriage or whatever it is she's in is going to be stopped and raided by, and who knows, there are so many people who could do this. It could be the Brotherhood without banners. It could be Nymeria and the Direwolf super pack. It could be the Blackfish. It could be the Blackfish's garrison who went somewhere else. There are lots of different groups who are all there who have an interest in not allowing that to go ahead. Reflective Rambling. Happy name day shout out for Lady Leaf Undale. Happy name day to you. I hope you're having a fantastic day. Super fandom supporter across many platforms from many excellent creators and groups. Well, that's wonderful. I think one of the amazing things about this community is that this is not an exclusive community. At least this is what I try to encourage here. This should be an inclusive community where there are many, many wonderful creators and groups across the world of A Song of Ice and Fire, and also into Lord of the Rings. I'm discovering more as I'm entering into there. It's don't just stick to one person you like. Try find the excellence in many other places. There are so many wonderful platforms, creators, and groups out there. So happy birthday. Question from Lawnduck20. Hi, Robert. A John chapter in Game of Thrones, Maester Aemon tells him the gods have tested his vows 3 times. Once when he was a boy, once as a man, and once when he was old. Do we know what these tests were? Also, John recalls the day he found Ghost and said he heard a noise which made him go back and find him in the snow. What was this noise? Was it Ghost talking for the one and only time, or do we blame Bloodraven? I think, if in doubt, blame Bloodraven, obviously. But yes, it was. I think it was probably Ghost making a noise, but this was Bloodraven walking into Ghost. The direwolves were there, I'm pretty sure, because Bloodraven put them there, and Ghost Bloodraven has been walking into for a long time. I did a video on this if you're interested. He's been walking into him for a very long time. The 3 tests that Maester Aemon talks about, he had been tested his vows 3 times. Well, the short answer is he doesn't then say, and these are the 3 times, so we don't know this, but we can be reasonably sure about 2 of them. The one when he was old was Robert's Rebellion. His entire family were being hunted down, killed, destroyed. He wanted to go and do something. That was one of the tests when he was an old man. Another test almost certainly was in the Great Council that made Aegon V king. Now, they first offered it to Aemon, and he turned it down. He was a maester at the time, and he turned it down because he was a maester, and he'd renounced all of that stuff. But obviously that would be testing his vows, because somebody turned around and says, well, hey, do you want to be king? Obviously that would be testing their vows. Now, the question is whether that's when he was a boy or a man. And I think I'd have to double check the exact dates, but I think he was in his early to mid 30s at that point. Now, it's possible that somebody as old as Maester Aemon thinks of that as when he was a boy, but probably not. Probably that means that the other time his vows were tested were when he was a boy, which means just a few years earlier when he had just become a maester. And we don't know what that is. We don't have any information on what that is. Maybe he fell in love with someone or something like that. We're not sure. I would like the idea that perhaps it was the tragedy at Summerhall years later. We know that he and Egg were very close. This was the thing which killed Egg. Maester Aemon had visions. He was in correspondence with Egg. He probably knew something was going to happen. That would be a testing time. But as I say, that doesn't quite fit, because that would be like a slightly older man time. So those that we know 2, the other we can just guess about. Morally, will Ned's bones finally get to lay at rest at Winterfell's crypts? I think they will arrive at Winterfell's crypts, but I think that Barbary Dustin will probably get in the way of them. Catherine Furseth, what, if anything, do you think will happen to Marwyn's glass candle that he left burning at the Citadel? Will someone like Sam use it? Yes, so it's in Alaras's hands at the moment, effectively, and I think that she will probably allow Sam to use it. This is the interesting thing here, is that this is suddenly opening up the world for us. Previously, we had very POV centric. We only know about what's happening in the little area that person whose point of view we're seeing the chapter from talks about and experiences. But now suddenly we're getting characters who might be able to see further. Bran can now start seeing things further in not just space but in time. If Sam gets the candle, then he will also be able to see things that are going on much, much further afield. And it may well be a thing that he rescues with it, because Sam, by the end of the Winds of Winter, will escape from Old Town and head back north. I'm pretty sure he will take what he thinks is very important. It will be, I think, the Horn of Winter. It will be Gilly. It will be maybe a book or two, and probably the Glass Candle. I think that's going north. Cloaked One for Lord Hermes. Again, thank you, Cloaked One. You're being very generous today. Thank you so much. Hi, how do you think Stannis will react to losing Storm's End to young Griff and learning that he might be Targaryen or Blackfyre? He saved the wall. Will he save the Stormlands? I mean, I don't think he'll react well, but I think that he kind of... I mean, he didn't give up on the Stormlands when he went north, but he reprioritized. And he said, this is what I'm doing now. And so I think that it will just redouble his focus on facing the others, basically. All he's doing right now is he is trying to sort out the north. This is a long-term planning. He wants to get Winterfell off of the Boltons so that he can get the Starks back into Winterfell so that he can unite the North. And when the North is united, they will have a chance to face against the others. Once he's defeated the others, he can then claim the crown he believes is rightfully his. That's his plan. It's quite a long, winding one, but I don't think that he will go... When somebody says Storm's End's fallen, I don't think he's going to suddenly turn around and go, well, that's it. I'm forgetting all of this stuff up north. I'm heading straight back down. He's not going to do that. He's going to stick with the project. Ellen, what do you think has made A Song of Ice and Fire so popular? Books or show? Well, both. Is the honest answer. It was already a very, very well-selling series before the show happened. In fact, it's a sad fact that all of the Song of Ice and Fire books we have so far were written before the show began. They were published before the show began. It's been a long time, obviously, but the books had gained a large following. They were New York Times bestsellers in America. They'd appeared on the bestseller lists in other countries too, and the books are really, really good. They're not just fun reads, but they have they win awards and Hugo Awards and things like that. So the books are clearly very important. What I think was the TV show made it stratospheric, to the extent that we can have people here. We're talking about a book series that we've been waiting over a decade for the next book in, and we're still unpicking it. That's how much people are loving this series. So it is the books, but the TV show brought in new people, and I'm not too proud to admit I'm one of those people. I've told this story before, but I'll happily say it again. So I got into all of this. I had ages ago. We all have that friend who we trust their book recommendations, and I was in a bookshop with them, and they said, "Here, you'd love this." Showed me a copy of Game of Thrones, and I went, "Oh yeah, I've heard good things about it, but it's a book series that's not finished. I didn't want to get into a book series that wasn't finished. I wanted to read all the way through." But he persuaded me to buy it, so I bought it and I put it on my bookshelf and I left it there. And then the TV show came on, watched season 1, loved it, and then immediately binged all the books before season 2 came on. So the TV show did hook me, and then the books hooked me even more. So it's a combination. I don't think you can separate the two. It's a combination of them. Reflective rambling saying, I've managed not to cave and get merch yet. I'm waiting for the Dan the Dog shirt. I have got another couple of ideas of merch coming soon. I haven't thought about doing a Dan the Dog one. Carl Karsnark saying, we defeated the bot army of 2021. We are epic. Mods, you are. I've said it a lot of times on this stream, but you're above and beyond the Call of Duty. Thank you very much. Swagger Dagger saying the third time possibly have something to do with the tragic Summerhall. Yeah, I picked that one up already. Question from Shetland Apache. Bran has clearly shrugged off moral implications of walking into Hodor. Do you think this is a glimpse into the winged wolf and walking into many? Possibly. I think it's showing us that he is morally compromised in the same way that Bloodraven is morally compromised. So we can't now just think of him as being a good person. We can think of him as someone who hasn't been shown, he hasn't been properly mentored, he hasn't been shown how to lead a good and positive life. It's really sad when you read it. It's really sad, and he goes and he takes over Hodor, and you know, he can feel Hodor. I can't remember the exact phrase, that it was like huddling himself in a corner of his mind. It's just like Hodor does not like it, and Bran is just doesn't care. Do I think this is a glimpse into the winged wolf and walking into many? Walking into many is an interesting one as well, because this is, if we accept as that the others have a sort of a warped version of green, being a green seer with the warging and the green sight, then does this mean that you can walk into more than one thing at once if you're very powerful? You probably does. And it's entirely possible that he will. It's more, I think this is more showing what he's capable of morally rather than anything else. If Sam and Frodo, this is Monkismo, if Sam and Frodo get through the Black Gate, can you imagine a scenario where they make it to Mount Doom alive? So the Black Gate, which actually this segues well, because I said, I dread to think, well, one live stream and 3 or 4 hours ago, I said the last part of this was going to be about Lord of the Rings. I've now reached my Lord of the Rings questions from my patrons. So thank you if you've been waiting patiently for that. So Sam and Frodo get shown to the Black Gate by Gollum. Sam, this is what Frodo charged him with: take me to the Black Gate, because that's the only way in that they knew about. And they don't go in that way. Gollum clearly doesn't want them to go that way. There's lots of bad guys that way. If they did get in that way, might they? Well, yes, they could theoretically. Their elven cloaks would certainly help them. There's a possibility, but almost certainly not. It's not just a matter of there are lots of people there. It's a matter of timing. The fact that they then circled back and around and went in through Cirith Ungol, that yes, there were fewer guards there, but it's also the timing allowed. What was happening elsewhere was Sauron's attention was being taken by the fact that Pippin looked into the Palantir, and Aragorn looked into the Palantir, and Sauron became convinced that Pippin was the hobbit that he'd been hearing about. Aragorn had now taken the ring from him, and why else would he challenge him so directly? And so he thought, I have to put all of my forces to try and stop Aragorn. That was what allowed Frodo and Sam in as much as anything else, is the movement of troops. That required time, and that wouldn't have happened if they'd got in through the Black Gate straight away. So questions onto Lord of the Rings questions. I'm happy to still take questions in the chat about Song of Ice and Fire, but I'm now moving on to some questions from my patrons. Actually, this is a couple of super chats I got right at the very beginning. Lyle Hammock saying, I've been getting into Gondor history, and I'm interested in the so-called events which weakened Gondor to a shell of their former glory. The Kinstrife, the Great Plague, and the invasion of the Wain Riders. Which of these damaged Gondor more, in your opinion? Okay, so this gives me a great chance to sort of do a little bit of Lord of the Rings history for beginners. So Gondor, we know about, around Minas Tirith. That was one of two great kingdoms, human kingdoms, which were founded by the escapees from Numenor. We know about Isildur. Isildur's dad was Elendil, and the idea was that his two sons, one would rule each of these two kingdoms. But then we had the battle with Sauron. Younger son was killed. Elendil was killed. Only Isildur survived, and he took the ring. Now, what happened after that, as we know, is that the two kingdoms just carried on with their kings. Arnor slowly got destroyed in the north. That's their royal royal family and the noble class, as it were, survived as the Dunedain, where Aragorn was one of them, the Rangers of the North. In the south, they had kings for a long time. Then their kings died out, and then they had the stewards. But in this long period of time in Gondor, what they should have been doing is keeping an eye out for Sauron's return, because they knew that they hadn't fully destroyed him. They destroyed his body, but his spirit was still out there somewhere, so they should have been keeping an eye out for him. And over time, very slowly, then they started not to do that as well. And there are three events here. There's lots of events, but three events Lyle talks about. The first of all, the Kinstrife. The Kinstrife was basically a succession crisis in Gondor. This was, I think, 1400 and something in the Third Age, so about halfway through the Third Age, between Valakar and Castamere. Yes, Castamere, another thing that George R. R. Martin liked the name and took it into A Song of Ice and Fire. So Valakar was the rightful heir, but his father, who'd been the king, had married somebody who wasn't from this royal Numenorian stock, and so a lot of people didn't like that. They considered it to be watering down the sort of the magical true bloodline. There was a civil war. Castamere won first of all, kicked out Valakar, and he ruled, but he wasn't very good. And he, during the battles, they lost the Palantir they had, the big glass ball thing, the far-seeing, like a glass candle, effectively, in A Song of Ice and Fire. They lost that. That had that in Osgiliath. So that went. But he was such a bad ruler that in time the people then turned back to Valakar, and then he came back and kicked out Castamere, and Castamere went away with a whole load of other people, and they went down to Umbar, and that's where the Corsairs of Umbar came from, who were a thorn in Gondor's side for a very long time. So a few things happened in that. first of all, yes, the sort of the magical bloodline was weakened. Secondly, they gained a new enemy, the Corsairs of Umbar. And thirdly, they lost their Palantir, so they didn't know so much about what was going on around the world. The second thing you talked about there was the Great Plague. This swept right across Middle-earth. It destroyed everybody pretty much in equal measure. So it's not that they lost any extra territory. Nobody invaded them during this time. But what they did do was, I mean, a lot of people died, and they pulled people out of the watchtowers that they had guarding the Mordor, so they no longer could see what was going on in Mordor. Which obviously, this was a couple of hundred years later, which obviously meant that, again, they didn't know what was going on. Then thirdly, you talked about the Wain Riders. These were what we might call Easterlings. They are humans under the influence of Sauron, and they came in over quite a few years, a few decades, lots of battles, and bit of toing and froing. Gondor did manage to push them back, but they lost control of the lands to the east of the River Anduin, which is the big river going through Gondor. And what that meant was that the Nazgul could then secretly go back into Mordor. The watchtowers were gone. The Palantir was gone. So they could then just start rebuilding Sauron's fortress in Mordor, and Sauron could return. So the question, this is a history lesson, but the question is, which of these was the most important? And the answer, of course, is all of them. They all had to happen in order for the return of Sauron. So that was... and they all, at least the second two, do seem to have been intentional on Sauron's part, or Sauron's forces' part anyway. So that was leading up to the situation that we have when we see Gondor in the Lord of the Rings, where Mordor is now Sauron's realm once more, and they've not really got much control of anything, and it's a matter of, how do we get here? Ellen saying, your subscribers are some of the smartest in the community. Thank you, mods, too. Yes, I agree on both of those things. Thank you, mods and subscribers. Thank you for being so smart. Maura Lee, thank you so much. Maura Lee, thank you so much for the epic live stream. Loving being able to participate in the chat. It's fantastic to have you in the chat. We've been going on quite a while. I've got about 2 or 3 more questions. So if you do want to drop anything into the chat, now is a good time. Lyle Hammack, you also asked whether I think Amandil could have stopped Sauron in the court of Numenor if he was as devious and ruthless. I have a theory that he couldn't, because like Ned Stark, his goodness and honesty meant that he couldn't match his enemy. So Amandil was Elendil's father, and they were the good guys, the faithful in Numenor. And he was friends with Ar-Pharazôn, who was the king. Ar-Pharazôn went out, fought Sauron, captured him, brought him back to Numenor, and Sauron basically wormed his way into the king's affections, and managed to get everybody turning from the good and right path and worshipping Melkor Morgoth, the real big baddie of Tolkien's world, and put these thoughts into his mind. Spoilers, by the way. Put these thoughts into his mind that they really should be like the elves. They should be able to live forever. Why don't they build a huge fleet and then just sail west and just claim what is theirs? Now, the question is, could Amandil have stopped this? Possibly. Maybe he was. We don't know enough about his character. Maybe, I mean, he definitely wasn't devious. But the fact is, Sauron was just too good at this. And by the time Amandil worked it out, it was a bit too late. And so yes, maybe he was just outmaneuvered, but I think it was just your Ned Stark analogy may well be right. He was just too good and upright, and Sauron was just too impressive at being nasty and manipulative. Maldor had a slightly more tragic end. He tried to do good things, but he at least managed to make sure that Elendil, his son, did get out. Mara Lee, so that was Dan again, if you heard that. Mara Lee saying, if Aragorn had been killed in the battle at the Black Gate, who would have been made steward or king in his place? Would it have been Faramir? If he had... I mean, he never came in and claimed the throne by force or anything like that. He got the throne because Faramir, who was steward, because Denethor died and Boromir was dead, he said to the people, this is Aragorn. He listed all of the things about him and said, I think he should be made king. What do you reckon? And everyone said, yep. That happened after the battle. So before the battle, Aragorn was just... I mean, he may have had a claim, but he wasn't king. So it would have just been Faramir being the steward, and that's where it would have ended. So the thing is that Aragorn's claim, it's presented certainly on the films and the movies as being like, well, obviously he's the rightful king. It wasn't that obvious in the books. If you look at it, Gondor reckoned their kings through Anarion, who was Isildur's brother, and Denethor himself as steward. The stewards were waiting for the king to return, but Denethor's position was that their king was the heir of Anarion, and that wasn't Aragorn. He was the heir of Isildur. He also was the heir of Elendil, who was Anarion's father, which is the way that Aragorn could claim it. But Gondor had, not just at that point, but earlier, a few generations back, Aragorn's predecessor, his ancestor, had claimed the throne of Gondor, and Gondor had sat down and thought about it and said, no, we reckon our kings through Anarion, you're through the line of Isildur, therefore you're not our rightful king. So actually Aragorn's claim was debatable. He was made king by popular acclaim, but it wasn't a done deal beforehand. It wasn't a thing where he could just walk in and everyone went, oh, of course, you're our king. He had to go through a number of different hoops, and Faramir lists all of these different things that he is. So it wasn't a done deal beforehand. Maester Mansa saying, I have a Tolkien-based question. It may be more of a video than a live stream question. What was Gandalf's actual plan for Bilbo in The Hobbit? I realise that it all worked out, and Gandalf has divine intuition, but he must have had an actual plan. Many of the plans in Lord of the Rings were long shots, but they had an obvious goal. This one doesn't. Bilbo openly questions it after Smaug's wrath at the stolen cup in the book, and it's never resolved. Was he meant to steal information? Then he'd be a spy. Was he meant to poison or drug Smaug with a potion? Then he'd be an assassin. Was he meant to steal the Arkenstone? But then what? As always, I'd love to hear your insight. Now, yes, I could make a video at this one, and I may well do, but it doesn't have a clear-cut answer, and because we're not given one, we have, in Book of Unfinished Tales, we have Gandalf's account of what was going on behind the scenes in the Quest of Erebor, which is the story of the Hobbit. And even in that, he doesn't really have a plan. It's clear Thorin comes here. So he had problems. He had to worry about Sauron, who was coming back to power in South Mirkwood at the time, and he had to worry about Smaug, who would be under the influence of Sauron when Sauron came into his full power, and so he was trying to figure out how to deal with those things. Then Thorin happens to meet him, and Thorin goes, "I want to go and reclaim the mountain where Smaug is," and so Gandalf's like, "Great, this is good. This can help solve that." He goes off and does the Sauron South Milkwood thing. Incidentally, that's why Gandalf disappears for half of the story. He was doing that, but it's clear that although he is he's got a very clear understanding of the fact that the dwarves just turning up and trying to fight a dragon wasn't going to work. They had to do it through stealth. He had very clear reasons for picking Bilbo. He didn't have a plan after that. And it's quite interesting. This comes up when they're all sat there at Bag End. And I wrote down the quote when they're debating what to do then. And Bilbo says, "If you sit on the doorstep long enough, I dare say you will think of something." And that's as close as they get to a plan. They have this backdoor key, and then they have to figure out what they're going to do after that. And Gandalf sort of leaves them to it. This is their quest. This is their adventure. This is their plan. What he is, and I think you hit the nail on the head with this. He has this kind of foresight, this greater understanding, which I will cover in a video in Lord of the Rings, because it's really important how the Maiar do have an understanding of what's going on in the world, because they have seen it happen already, but it's largely clouded to them, but they've got an outline of it. Gandalf has, and he a couple of times tries to impress on Thorin that, and he doesn't give his reasons, but he just says, "I just know that if you bring Bilbo with you, you'll be successful, and if you don't, then you won't." And he just says this a few times, and it's like he's not got a plan, but he just knows how the pieces fit together. And so when he arrives finally, they've already got in. and so the plan, Gandalf wasn't really a part of that. That was it. He was going to leave the dwarfs to sort that bit out. It sounds almost like a cop-out, but it's actually showing this how Gandalf operates. Gandalf is not there as being a general telling everybody to do this and then do that and all the rest of it. He is there to encourage and support, and that is what his role is. And he could see that Bilbo going with them was part of this. He didn't know the details, but he could encourage them in making sure they took the right steps. Okay, those are my questions from my patrons. Got a couple of things to pick up from the chat. Anti-Gagan, thank you so much for the super chat. I didn't see a question attached to that. So maybe just flicking through, seeing whether or not it's anywhere near. People talking about Dan. He's around the corner, though, is the thing. So my house kind of goes around there, so he sort of every now and then he stands up and does that dog shaking thing, which maybe you can hear. Dan at the moment, reflective rambling, is begging me to let him go upstairs. I don't know why he didn't go upstairs. He normally takes himself up to bed nice and early. He didn't this time. Okay, I can't see the question. Oh, Anthony, I don't know if this is what you're going to say. Can I be forgiven for not being able to get through the Fellowship of the Ring when I was younger? Yes, you can be forgiven. Just try it again now. There are a lot of, whenever people read The Lord of the Rings for the first time, I think one of the things that strikes them most, there are a lot of bits of poetry and song and random history that Tolkien loves, I love, but it does, it makes it read at changing pace sometimes. J. Lord saying, Lyanna, this is back to A Song of Ice and Fire. Lyanna was said to be taken near Harrenhal a year after the tourney. It makes sense she would be in the Riverlands on the way to the wedding, but not that far south. Friends with Lord Went's daughter. Yeah, so we're not told. This is an interesting little detail. We're not told what happened with Lyanna between the tourney and the wedding. But so the Starks, all 4 Stark kids were at the tourney at Harrenhal. Daddy Stark was up in Winterfell. There must always be a Stark in Winterfell. After the tourney at Harrenhal, Ned heads off to the Eyrie with his mate Robert Baratheon. Brandon heads off to Riverrun, where he's going to be getting married at some point. Benjen heads north, where he's going to become the Stark in Winterfell, and then his father Rickard is going to come down in time for the wedding. That's the plan. We're not told what happens to Lyanna. My best guess is yes, she stays in Harrenhal. Maybe so. Rickard seemed to have been very keen to gather allies in the south, and it makes a lot of sense that there's no point in her going all the way up north, or only to come all the way back down south to say, okay, for however long this is, months or a year, you can stay here effectively as a ward in Harrenhal. That would make absolute sense to me. And yes, she is picked up again near Harrenhal. So I think she just did not move. I think she just stayed there. As you say, maybe she was friends with Lord Went's daughter. We don't know, but maybe it was it certainly was with Rickard Stark's blessing. Unlucky Meteor 55 saying, can men regain the strength and longevity of Numenor? Not within the timing and canon of the Lord of the Rings. Tolkien did give us a bit of a forward look into the Fourth Age after the story of the Lord of the Rings, and after Aragorn, then Aragorn's son also had a long life. After him, a slightly less long life, then a slightly less long life, and it just slowly came down to our human lifespans nowadays. So no is the short answer. The magic slowly left. Sparkle Burner saying, thank you for your content. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Cloaked One for Robin Blackwood. There are a lot of humans called sorcerers in Tolkien's works, such as some of the Nazgul. Do we ever get an idea of what these sorcerers were capable of in terms of magic? Not specifically, but we get to see the effects of it. So to take the Witch King as an example, who was a sorcerer, he certainly seemed to have dispatched wights, the Barrow wights. So he created them in some way and then bound them in some way. He certainly seems to have with him some kind of aura of fear that literally sends people running away. He has this black breath which can knock people out. When you get outside Rivendell, he raised his hand, and Frodo's sword just broke. So you see these bits of magic, but it's a very, very understated magic system. It's not like I'm going to do a spell now and da-di-da-di-da. Occasionally Gandalf says something like that, but it's more natural feel than that. It's a working with the world as much as anything else, and it's explained. Gets to Lothlorien, and he talks about the magic of the elves, and Galadriel says, we don't talk of it as magic, it's just how it is. And so that is a lot more of the feel. It's not this sort of, I know this spell or that spell or the rest of it. You can, if you were a magic user or a sorcerer, you can do things, but it's not like from a spell list that you have to pick. I got one more question, I think Pelzi, does Bran seem so different because he's being controlled by the old gods, or is it just all the experiences he's had that have changed him? If this is on the show, it's because he's being not controlled by the old gods, but now he's been subsumed within the Weirwood network. In the books, he's not yet in that position, but it's his experiences that have shaped him. He's still a young boy, and he's gone through a lot, and that, I mean, in many ways, it's astonishing he's surviving as well as he had. He's seen and experienced so much. He's quite well adjusted for what he has been through. Anthony Gagan saying, just to say, I found your channel and really been enjoying the short time here. I have no in-depth knowledge, but enjoyed learning about Tolkien's world. Excellent. Well, welcome. It's fantastic to have you. Alicia Kingston, all sorcerers, wizards, and witches have the capacity to be good or evil. Yes, absolutely. I think that's Tolkien's way of saying this as well, is that it's not the magic itself isn't the good or evil thing. It's what's in people's hearts, very much. Andrew Kay saying Lord of the Rings content has ignited his interest and highlighted more complexity and nuance at work than I realized, and a great resource with the Amazon series on the way. I'm really pleased. Thank you. Good. Reflective rambling. Just wondering who it was she was betting on when we'd hit 250k. I remember saying August or July. Can't remember if I said 250 or 300. Not sure what I owe you at first. Okay, well, I'm glad people are taking bets on next milestones. I'm not sure. Growth on YouTube, just to complete aside, growth on YouTube is not linear. For whatever reason, the algorithm picks up a video or a couple of videos, and then suddenly you get this huge burst. And then for whatever reason, it doesn't on other videos that you think are equally good. So these things, they go in bursts, but it's worked well over the last few weeks, which is excellent. Okay, everyone, I think I will call that a day for 2 live streams today. Thank you again, moderators, for excellent work. We had, if you're just coming into this, I'll try and stitch these together in some way. The two of them, I'm not sure whether I'll succeed, but we had a bit of an attack from some bots spamming in the doing some nasty spam into the chat room, so had to stop that one, restarted again. Hopefully didn't miss too much along the way, but we will be back next week. Haven't decided on the topic yet. Please, if you want to put suggestions, bung them down in the comments below afterwards. If you are watching this a bit later, then appearing somewhere here-ish will be a link to other live streams if you'd like to watch some more. Appearing here-ish is going to be a link to my Patreon page, which is the best way to support this channel if you would like to do that. Okay, everyone, take care. Have a fantastic rest of your day, and I will see you again next time. Bye now.